Today's guest is Pattie Ehsaei. Her life's journey has been one of huge challenges, from her arrival in the United States as an immigrant who didn't speak a word of English and the loss of both parents, and extraordinary triumphs that include completing law school, becoming a criminal prosecutor, and being a leader in the financial industry. These days, she is dubbed the Duchess of Decorum and is wowing her ever-expanding TikTok audience as she explains the ins and outs of etiquette and workplace decorum. And perhaps most importantly, I have to add that Pattie is a true blue Dallas Cowboys fan. So I knew
That's
we were
right.
kindred spirits from the very start. Pattie Ehsaei, welcome to Next Steps Forward.
Thanks, Chris. Go Cowboys.
Say one thing we have to say before we start, one big
That's
question. How
right.
about them Cowboys?
Yep.
I love it. I love it. So on a more serious note, I mentioned the huge challenges that you faced. Let's start there because we talk so much about leadership through adversity, how people triumph over adversity speaks so much to who they are and can be so instructive to others facing their own challenges. You were born in Iran. How, when, and why did your family come to the United States?
So we came when the revolution happened. My mother actually worked for the Shah of Iran. She was the head nurse in the maternity ward at the hospital where that the Shah owned and the government owned. And my dad also had a very prominent career in Iran. And once the revolution occurred, my dad was really afraid that they would come after us and they would want to kill us just because we had connections with the Shah. So we essentially escaped. I mean, we escaped with a few suitcases, and our airplane was the last flight that was allowed out of Iran. After our airplane left, they completely shut down the entire airspace. Yeah. So we were very, very fortunate to get out.
So if I can just stick with that for a minute, I just can't imagine, we've seen that a month or so ago with the withdrawal from Afghanistan, people trying to flee.
Yep.
What was it like trying to escape a situation like that? And how did you do it?
Yeah, it was really horrific because we lived in an area that was kind of like a compound, and a lot of people that worked for the Shah lived there. And I remember the night that we left, there were thousands and thousands of people outside of the gate wanting to break in to kill us. So if you can imagine, I was 7 years old, and just the thoughts of not knowing what was going to happen in our future. And the only way that we got out is because my dad had an importing and exporting business. And because of that, he had a lot of connections in the airlines and the airports. So he made a call, and, they were like, okay, come, let's do it. You have to do it now. So I don't remember exactly how we got to the airport, but I remember boarding that plane and just being scared to death, thinking that we were going to die any second.
I can't imagine doing that today when I'm 51, let alone at
Right.
the age of 7.
Yeah, it was
Um,
hard.
I mean, kudos to you and your family. So that's just terrific.
Thank you.
So when you got here at age 7, any English. I visited other countries where I don't speak the language, but there's a big difference between me being someplace for a day or two and being thrown in that situation permanently. How long did it take you to learn English? What approaches did you take? And what was that process like?
It was very hard because in the beginning, they kind of threw you in school back then. There wasn't ESL or any special programs. So I remember the first day of school, they took me in and I sat down. And the only thing I can remember is the teacher saying my name because I didn't speak any English. And I was so intimidated that the entire day I didn't look up from my shoe. Like my head was just down the entire day because I felt so intimidated. I didn't know how to even say to go to the bathroom or anything like that. So that was my first day. But luckily, kids are very resilient, right? So, and I learned to adapt. I started to, make some friends, and slowly started to learn English. And it took me, I would say, a few years to really get the hang of the language. But I also think that it was hard for me academically because it took me years to catch up. I don't think I caught up academically until I was probably in ninth grade is when I think I actually, caught up with my peers. So that was a really a huge roadblock for me because I was thinking I'm just not smart, I'm just not that bright when that wasn't it. I just didn't have, the academic background and the language background.
Well, we know the smarts and brightness is not an issue right now. And
Thank you, Chris.
let's stick with the academics there for a minute. When you were younger, you had difficulty focusing on lessons in school because you have ADHD and dyslexia. That
Yes.
obviously added to the challenges of learning a new language. In what other ways did it add to the difficulties of growing up? And how did you overcome those obstacles? Was there a mentor that helped you? What were the challenges?
Yes. So, yes, I couldn't speak English and I couldn't sit still. And I was dyslexic. So those that's not a great combination, right? It's a horrible combination. So, while I was learning English, I was always known as my teachers would tell my parents, she's a great girl. We really like her. She just talks too much. And that's because I couldn't sit still. And I had difficulty processing information because I had dyslexia, right? So I really had to just suck it up and do what I could with it, because again, back then you weren't diagnosing people with ADHD, you weren't diagnosing people with dyslexia. It was like, oh, she just has a hard time learning, guess she's not that smart. So I went through that until the ninth grade, and it wasn't until the ninth grade, my ninth grade English teacher, his name is Gary Stoddard. I'll never forget him. He told me I was doing well in English for the first time, and he said, you should be in AP English next year. I was like, oh, what do you mean? And he's like, yeah, you should be in AP English. I'm like, are you sure I can do it? He's like, absolutely, you're really smart. And that's the first time someone had called me smart. And the next year, I remember the first day of AP English, I was so intimidated. I walked in, I was like, I definitely don't belong here. But very quickly, I learned that I was just as smart, if not smarter than the people in those classes. That just changed my mindset, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I am smart. So I started to excel in school. I became, one of the top people in a lot of the classes. And that really changed the trajectory of my life. If it weren't for Mr. Stoddard, I probably wouldn't be here today.
Have you had any contact with him since then? Does he know the great success that you are?
Yes. So he left right after my freshman year. He went to teach at BYU. And so we lost touch. And I reached out to him a few years ago on LinkedIn. And I told him the story. And I said, you changed my life. And he said, thank you so much for sharing that with me, because you never know as a teacher whether you're actually impacting someone's life or if you're not. And I owe him so much for that.
That's great. I love those
Yeah.
stories. So there's recently been a lot of talk about ADHD being overdiagnosed. Do you think that causes some parents to mistrust diagnosis of ADD or ADHD?
Yes, for sure. I think as soon as they see a kid that can't sit still, they're like, "Oh, well, you definitely have ADHD," and that's typically not the case, because ADHD typically, I'm not a doctor, but from what I've been told, doesn't happen by itself. It comes with another type of learning disability. So, like, I have ADHD and dyslexia, right? It typically manifests itself with something else. So, just pure ADHD in itself is not necessarily a thing. I am really more concerned about it being overtreated, because kids, are diagnosed with ADHD and then pumped with drugs. And that really is something that is very, very disheartening to me. And, we're just pumping our kids with drugs and not understanding what it's doing to them and their mental capacities. And you're just numbing the children. And that's really hard. And I think a lot of parents do that because for some reason there's a stigma of your child having ADHD, right? But this is just something that they were born with, just like someone is born tall, someone is born short. It's just another characteristic. It's nothing to be ashamed of. And they can definitely overcome it, as I have. So it's not anything to be ashamed of. And I think parents need to understand that and stop pumping drugs into these kids.
And I'm sure you have a wealth of advice that you can share with parents of adopted parents of immigrant children. What would you tell them, as someone who's been through this journey as an immigrant child, to help today's youngest immigrants navigate their way through a new country?
Oh, Chris, I can talk about an hour just on this topic.
The mic is yours.
Yeah, thank you. I think one thing that immigrant kids need to understand is that they're not bound by their current circumstances, that this can be temporary, and their parents brought them to this country so they can have a better life, better opportunities. And they have an opportunity to write their own damn hero story, like I did, and do with it what you wish. It's not going to be easy. Life is going to suck for a while. You're going to work 100 times harder than the non-immigrant. You're going to work 100 times harder than the affluent kid. They're going to be handed opportunities that you have to fight and claw for. Okay. So it's going to be hard. And, you're going to feel jealous of people around you that don't have to go through those struggles, that don't have these weird parents that don't speak English or do weird things, or, that they have parents that are helping them in their schooling and whatnot, and your parents aren't able to do that. You're going to feel that jealousy. And, for example, I remember when I was in law school, I went to law school full time and I worked 3 jobs. I had 2 waitressing jobs and I worked at a law firm. And my best friend didn't have to work at all. Everything was paid for. So I was like jealous of her, right? Like, why can't I be that? But what people have to understand is when you're an immigrant and the struggles that you have to go through, you are building character and you're building determination, you're building resilience, and most important, adaptability and survival instincts that most people don't have. To be able to adapt as an immigrant and to be able to survive as an immigrant, these are skills that are going to serve you so much better in life than the people that didn't have to go through the struggle. So go through the struggle and reach your goal, because once you do, that goal is going to be so much sweeter than the person who reaches a goal that hasn't had to struggle for it. Because for some reason, in our mentality, when we have to work harder for something, we just like it more, right? And those skills are going to help you so much in life. And, I want to give the example when I was in private equity in 2009 and the market crashed. And most of the people that I worked with came from affluent backgrounds, most of them, not all of them. And they really didn't have to struggle. So when we shut the doors in our firm, everyone was freaking out, like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm going to be homeless, freaking out. But since I had the ability to adapt and those survival instincts that I learned, I wasn't freaked out at all. I was like, well, I can just go wait tables and make, $60,000 a year. It's fine. Let me just think about the next step, right? What am I going to do next? While they were sitting there freaked out. And I just had lunch with my boss from that old firm. And he told me, he said, out of everyone that came out of that firm, you're the most successful one. And I don't think I would be that if I wasn't an immigrant and if I wasn't able to adapt and if I wasn't able to survive. So know that you have a lot of advantages when you're an immigrant because you have to go through those struggles. And in the long run, you're going to be more successful than most people could ever be.
Well, I know you're working on a book and we're going to get to that a little bit later, but I think we just found something, a title for your short list anyway, of Write Your Own Damn Immigrant Story. I love that. So just putting that out there.
I love it. Maybe I'll use it.
I wrote that down for you. We can share that later. So it's been a while since you left your home country. Have you been back to Iran, or do you have any plans to go back?
I have been back. I've been twice, and I love it there. It's interesting. I've lived most of my life in the U.S., but the feeling that I get when I'm in Iran is just very different. It's a feeling that I've never experienced in the U.S. It's just a feeling of being home and your native country and your native land and people speaking your native language. So yeah, I actually really love Iran. I would love to go back again.
You faced adversity when you lost both of your parents at the age of 24. And on top of that, you were left with the responsibility of taking care of your brother. A lot of young people would say, I can't do that. Someone else is going to have to take care of him, but you didn't. Can you tell us about that chapter in your life?
Sure. I think that came from the immigrant mentality that you take care of your family, right? So it wasn't even a question of whether my brother was my responsibility or not. I just took on that responsibility. And, it was a bit of a struggle because my brother in his own right, I mean, he was valedictorian. Unlike me, he didn't have ADHD. He wasn't dyslexic. He never had a B before in his life. So, we had great aspirations. We had great ideas of what he was going to be. And I never wanted him to drop the ball on that because he didn't have parents. So, we went through a phase where it was a struggle because I was trying to be his parent. And I kind of was anyway, because again, my parents were immigrants. And so I'm 5 years older than him. So I had figured things out. So I was the one talking about where he should go to school and how he should do things because I had already done that. And it was a bit of a struggle because, I was so consumed with him wanting to succeed and being super successful that I forgot to really think through his emotional well-being. So while I, pushed him to succeed and, he ended up going to law school and he's super successful. He has a, very high position in the FBI now. So, he did exceptionally well for himself. It was a struggle to do that, but I was happy to do that because I didn't want to let my parents down because I knew what they wanted for him.
Well, I'm sure they're very proud of both of you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
So you flee your native land at the age of 7 in the middle of the night. You come to a country with where you can't speak the language. You learn later on about ADD, dyslexia. You've earned an undergraduate degree. You went on to law school and got your law degree. You passed the bar exam in not one, but 2 states and became a criminal prosecutor.
Yep.
Why criminal prosecution? Why not corporate law, family law, some other discipline?
Yeah, I when I was in college, when I was an undergrad, I was a clerk and a volunteer at the district attorney's office. And there is when, I learned how important it was to help the underdog. And I had been an underdog. So I'm always about helping the underdog. So being a criminal prosecutor was something that, was very much interesting to me. And, what better way to do your work, get paid for it, and help people. So that was the first reason that I wanted to be a criminal prosecutor. And the second reason is because I have ADHD and dyslexia, those corporate jobs were never for me. Like I had really, I had a lot of difficulty in law school, like taking exams, taking tests, again, because of my learning disability. However, where I truly shined was in my trial advocacy class. So, that's when I became a Corbo fellow, which is at Loyola, what they do is a national mock trial team. So I made that team. And, I was good at that. I could talk all day. When it came to writing, I wasn't so good. So sitting behind a desk all day as a corporate lawyer or a family lawyer or something like that, I just can't think of anything that'd be more grueling.
So as a prosecutor, you're dealing with traumatized victims, horrible crimes, and the worst of the worst people. Happens to me all the time.
My
No worries.
apologies.
No worries. So how quickly do lawyers, doctors, therapists, and other professionals who work with those situations become desensitized?
Very, very quickly. And it's really sad because those people become desensitized because you're seeing these horrible things over and over and over again all the time. And you don't even realize it until, you wake up one day and you're like, oh, the rape victim, that's not really a big deal. That's not really a big deal. And, so I was in the sex crimes unit for kids. And I remember when I was speaking with my colleagues about the adults that were getting raped, I start to think, well, they're adults. They're not even kids, suck it up. I was like, wow. And, now, if I see a dead body, I'll just step over it kind of thing, because you're so used to seeing all these things. And unfortunately, the people that are in those jobs, the only way they deal with it is by trying to numb themselves. So they numb themselves through drinking, through partying. And a lot of those prosecutors drink a lot. That's just a fact. And that's just because that's the only way they can numb themselves and deal with that.
Do you see a crisis happening there in that profession?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't really know a way around that, because you can try to detach yourself, but it's hard. I never mastered that. And it really takes a piece of your soul that you will never get back.
Well, you mentioned detachment there. Is there a certain amount of detachment that's good or even necessary? And how do you strike the right emotional balance, that enabled you to have empathy, but not to take too much out of you?
Yeah. Again, I never really mastered that. But I think you automatically become detached because you become desensitized. So the thing, 2 months ago that freaked you out, that you went home and thought about, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't sleep at night, that doesn't have the same effect on you. So you become detached through desensitization, I think.
And as a criminal prosecutor, did you ever see a certain type of criminal that surprised you? Someone who most people think there's no way that person could commit a crime.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, most of the sex offenders are people that you would never ever guess would be sex offenders. They're like the cute chubby guy next door, who's the nicest person that you would never think that. And the reason for that is that those are the most inconspicuous people. The people that are the weirdos, you see immediately people report those guys. So they can't even, they don't even get to the point where they could be true sex offenders. You know, the first thing they do, they get caught and that's it. But it's the guys that you don't really anticipate being that are the antithesis of what you would think are the ones that commit all the crimes. I mean, look at Ted Bundy, for example. I mean, he was a law student, he was charming, he was good looking. That's why he was able to get away with all of these things. If he were anything but that, he would have gotten caught years ago.
We've had a few guests on regarding sex crimes and human trafficking, and they always say, to your point, it's the person you'd least expect. And it's, people think, not in my neighborhood, there's no way that could happen.
Right.
And it's right under the nose, the guy or the gal next door.
Absolutely. It's actually very scary.
You left criminal law to pursue a new career path. How did that happen? And what advice do you have for someone in our audience who may be thinking of making their own career change?
That don't be afraid to make a career change. Sometimes you have to take a step back to take two steps forward. And for me, how this happened is I moved to California and, I was going to go work for a bankruptcy firm just because the criminal prosecution just got the best of me. And I was at a job fair for one of my friends, not even for me. I just went with him, and there was someone there from Wells Fargo, and I was just hanging out, and I just happened to be talking to him, and he really liked me, and we were talking. He was from Merchant Services; those are the people that do the credit card processing. And he said, you could come, you should come work for us. I could tell you could sell, and because I was an attorney, I was selling my case to the judge and the jury, so there really are a lot of skills that overlap. And, and I said, well, I'm really interested in a management position. And he said, well, I can't give you a management position now. You're going to have to sell and prove yourself. So just imagine, I went from being a prosecutor to selling credit card processing door to door. Okay. I mean, I remember the first day I was in like the Valley, which is the hottest area of LA. It was like 110 degrees. I was in a suit with heels. I mean, I had blood in my shoe because I had so many blisters. I mean, I had to peel my suit off me. But I wasn't short-sighted. And I think that's the issue with a lot of people when they want to make a career change. They're like, well, I'm not going to go take a step back and do whatever because I've been in this position, but that's really short-sighted. And I took that job, and after 4 months, I was the number one salesperson in the country. And 2 months later, they gave me a management job. And that's how I excelled to where I am today. If I had not taken that step back or had the guts to make that career change, I wouldn't be here. I would still be, a prosecutor or working behind a desk at a bankruptcy firm.
Why is that no surprise to me that after 4 months, you're the number one salesperson in the country? It's no surprise.
Thank you.
You began to share your knowledge of business decorum and etiquette on TikTok. What was it about the medium that you led to choose TikTok, and how do people find you on TikTok?
Yeah, so I have done a lot of work with Big Brothers and Big Sisters. I was actually a big sister, and I was right before the pandemic. I was scheduled to go and give a lot of talks at their events to the kids in the program. And when the pandemic happened, that was all shut down. And I felt like the information was so important to get out there. And I woke up at 2:30 in the middle of the night. I was like, I can make videos with this information because kids are always, watching videos and things like that. So so at that point, I decided to make some YouTube videos. Didn't go so well. I only, was getting like 25 views. But again, this is failure. You learn from it. So I looked at the analytics. People started dropping off about a minute and 25 seconds. I was like, you know what? This is too long. Let me go to TikTok. So TikTok is 1 minute fast. And I locked myself in my room for 4 days. I posted 3 a day, and here I am. And you can find me at Duchess of Decorum. That is my handle, Duchess of Decorum on TikTok.
What sparked your interest in etiquette and decorum and sharing information about it with others?
I think this is crucial information that people don't have when they enter the workplace.
We lost Patty for a minute. The joys of working from home and Wi-Fi. We lost you there for a second. Would you mind repeating that? Your Wi-Fi cracked out on us.
Sure. So I think this is just very important information to get out there. And most people don't have this information. So, and it's important in success. So that's why I think it's something that I want to make accessible to all the masses.
Etiquette can be very daunting and unnerving for many people. Is it a matter of social class and maybe feelings of insecurity or maybe even inferiority? Or are there other factors at work? Why does etiquette cause so many people to worry?
It causes people to worry because people feel like they don't know proper etiquette and they're afraid to mess up and they're afraid to look stupid and embarrass themselves. That's really what it is. And again, etiquette shouldn't be just for the rich. It shouldn't be just for the privileged. Etiquette is something everyone should learn, something that should be accessible to everybody. And it's not really that hard. I mean, I taught myself. So, it's not that hard to learn etiquette. Just watch my videos. It's so easy, I promise. You'll learn immediately.
And let's take the flip side of that question. It seems like fewer people follow proper etiquette and that many people's behavior has become more coarse these days. Why do you think that's happened? Is there any chance of reversing that trend?
That's happened, I think, because this day and age, we're so about individuality and I am who I am. Don't try to change me. This is just me. And I identify with however I want to identify. If I want to look like a slob eating, then that's perfectly okay. Who's to tell me not to? So I think that's one of the reasons that we don't see it that often. But I think those people really have a rude awakening when they go into real life and they understand that, yeah, there are rules. Sorry, you may be who you are, but there's certain ways that you have to act and there's certain ways that you have to behave in social settings that are considered proper and not. So, it's not all about you doing whatever the hell you want to do just because you're an individual.
And what are the most common etiquette mistakes that you see people make?
The way they hold their fork. People typically hold their fork incorrectly. You're supposed to hold your fork between your index finger and your thumb. And most people will hold it or some people will hold it like this or with their middle finger or in between their middle finger and their ring finger. So that's something I see very common. And another etiquette mistake is they don't cut steak or meat properly. So you'll see someone cutting meat and just sawing back and forth, and that's improper etiquette. You're supposed to cut from the top down in one direction. That's a huge mistake that I see most people make. Most people don't know that rule.
I don't think I knew the one about the steak. I'll have to make sure I think of that next
Now
time
you
we
do.
we do some
Now you
grilling
do.
out back.
Yep.
You had an interesting experience with a man in a restaurant that tells a valuable lesson about manners. I got a real kick out of that story when we spoke last week. Would you share that with our audience as is a perfect example of why it pays to be nice to everyone?
Sure. Yes, this is the perfect example. So when I was a prosecutor, as a prosecutor, you don't make that much money. I was making like $30,000 a year. So I waited tables at night. And one night, these three guys come in, and it was after a Bulls game, and they were wasted. And one of the guys kept calling me like, "Hey, babe, babe, babe," and I kept saying, "Hey, sir, my name's not Babe, it's Patty." And he just, wouldn't stop doing that. It was just so rude to me. And then he didn't like the way that I was not responding to the babe. So he tells my manager that I'm racist and all these like ridiculous things that hadn't even come into play. And my manager then reprimanded me, and I was so upset. And this is the first time I've ever, and only time I've ever cried at work. I went into the closet and I was like crying, and I was like praying to the universe. I'm like, you know what? I don't have the power to do something to this guy, but you do. I'm like, just, serve justice on this guy for doing this to me. So the next day I go to work, my day job as a prosecutor, and I was actually a first chair in the DUI courtroom. And guess who had gotten a DUI that night? That guy. And he walked into my courtroom, and he looked like he'd seen a ghost. And he was like, he just looked at me, his eyes got really big. And I just continued doing, and he walks over to me. He goes, "Are you the defense attorney in this courtroom?" And I said, "No, sir, I'm the first chair prosecutor. Please have a seat." So yeah, so he wasn't happy. and it got even better. He asked for a public defender. And so the public defender talked to me and was like, what is your offer? And I said, oh, he's not getting the minimum. And the public defender's like, why? What happened? And I told him what happened. He's like, oh, so this guy has money. I'm like, yeah. He goes, oh, well, I'm not going to defend him. So they made him go back, bring his own attorney. And when he came back, he was such a jerk that he didn't get the minimum anyway, that the judge gave him a higher sentence for just being a jerk. So yeah, you never know who you are being rude to and disrespectful to. There's a saying my dad will always say, be careful which feet you step on because they may be attached to the ass you got to kiss later. So be careful who you're rude to.
I have to write that one down too. That's a beautiful case study of karma. That's just
Yep,
unbelievable.
exactly.
No, I
Exactly.
love that story. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
What are your top 3 pieces of etiquette advice that you think everyone in the audience should know?
Top 3, and these are really easy, but most people don't abide by them. One is if you're at dinner with a group of people, make sure that everyone gets their food before you start to eat. Don't start to eat the second they plop the food down in front of you. This isn't a contest to see who finishes faster. So this is your dining with people. So that's the first one. The second one is if you're getting up to go to the restroom, simply excuse yourself. You don't need to tell everybody and announce it to the world that you're going to the bathroom. It's just so rude when we're sitting, someone's like, oh, I got to go to the bathroom. Okay, well, just excuse yourself. You don't need to announce that to everybody. And the third is the mistake I see a lot of people make, and they should really not do that, is anytime you go to someone's house, never go empty-handed. Always take a small gift or a token of your appreciation. So never go to anyone's home empty-handed.
Words to live by.
Yep.
And what would you say to someone who says to you that some of these ideas may be antiquated?
That those people don't understand the reasons for etiquette. They think it was just, something that came up in the Victorian era and some, posh dude and decided that this is the way we're going to do things. And that's simply not the truth. There are reasons for every etiquette rule.
Then why do you think etiquette is just as relevant today as it ever has been?
Because like I said, there's reasons for these rules. So for example, the etiquette rule of you should always pass food to the right. Okay. That comes from the idea of you don't want a bunch of food going across the table and it spilling and it just being chaos. So these rules are there for, certain reasons. They create order, and, order is always welcome and order is never antiquated.
Why do you think there are so many young adults who do not know proper etiquette in the same way that generations before them did?
I think because, again, the same mentality of, I'm independent. I don't need to worry about how I eat. And so, their parents weren't taught. And so if their parents aren't taught, they're not teaching their children. I think that's really why we don't see it that often, but I want to try to change that. And that's another reason I make these etiquette videos, is just, so people learn and they understand it's not that hard.
And that's a great setup. What's your handle on TikTok again?
Duchess of Decorum.
Love it. We'll get that tagged out there as well.
Thank you.
When should we start teaching our kids about proper etiquette?
As soon as they get out of the high chair and are sitting in a regular chair, even with a booster seat, you got to start early. If you don't start early, those habits are really, really hard to break. So the sooner you start, the better. The sooner they understand how to place their napkin on their lap, what, utensils they should use, that you should start right then and there.
How important is proper etiquette to career advancement? Is it something only for people in the C-suite, or is it something that has the potential to make or break folks' careers?
Oh, it can make or break your career. And I've seen it happen. You think it's just for the C-suite people, but no, if you're at a work function, most people that are in the higher end of that company know proper etiquette and are watching you. And they will see how you're eating and how you're behaving. And if you're behaving like you were raised by wolves, that's not going to be a good look for you. And it can potentially ruin your career, because they're thinking, well, if we promote this individual is going to embarrass the hell out of us if we go out to dinner with someone, if we're going to lunch with someone, and they're not going to risk that. So you can certainly get your career ruined and not get promoted just because you don't know proper etiquette, for sure.
And sticking with workplace etiquette for another moment, I saw a couple of stories that list the top workplace etiquette questions that many people have. I've changed them just a little, but let's take them one by one.
All
Are you
right, let's
ready?
do it. Yes,
All right.
let's go for it.
First, how can I say no to my boss without sounding rude?
Well, you never say no. There's other ways of saying it, right? So no is never something that should come out of your mouth. But what you should focus on is the reason you don't want to do a certain task. Okay. And express that. So, for example, if you're working on 3 projects and your boss comes and says, "Hey, I want you to work on this 4th project," instead of saying, "No, I don't have time," or "No, I can't do it," you say, "I would love to help you with the project. However, the 3 projects that I'm working on are taking up all of my time. Will you help me prioritize my work so I can figure out how to include this project and be able to help out?" So at that point, you're telling your boss, "I really don't have the time for this, but I'm happy to do it. But you got to help me out and figure out how I'm going to make the time," and hope that
Second,
they go to another person.
yes, exactly. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
And second, when someone asks me out to lunch, who's expected to pay?
The person who asks. And this is a bit controversial, but I always say whoever asks should pay because you're the one asking for that individual to spend their time with you. Okay. So if you're asking them for that, then you should be paying. However, I think that rule becomes a lot more flexible once you've established a relationship with someone or a friendship. So it's at that point it's a little bit more casual. So you don't necessarily have to follow whoever asks pays because that's just not fair in any type of relationship. But I think in the beginning, whoever asks pays.
And next, this is a real 2020s etiquette question.
Okay.
Is it a good idea to add my workers to my social networking sites?
Oh, horrible idea. Absolutely horrible idea. Because they're your coworkers and you may think they're your friends, but they also are working in an environment with you. And if they see something that they don't like, they can report you. And that could cause you your job. That could cost you your job. So you never want to do that. Keep it separate.
Related to that question, what should I tell a coworker if I turn down their invitation to join their social network?
I would say a really nice way of saying it is, "I really appreciate you reaching out to me to connect on LinkedIn or whatever it is, or on Facebook. However, I really like to keep my personal life separate from my work life. And I think it would benefit us both if we do that."
And let's stick with LinkedIn just for a minute. I know that's a bit of a sticky point because it kind of crosses the personal and professional realm.
Yeah.
I was on LinkedIn years ago, but really kind of saw it as, I call it Facebook for business,
Yeah.
and wasn't active on it until years later. I was looking to transition jobs and realized what a great tool it actually is.
Yes.
People try and post things that are very business minded or whatever their profession is, but sometimes it gets a little gray in there.
Yes.
Is it the same rules for LinkedIn as it is for Facebook and other social media platforms?
Yes, absolutely. One thing you mentioned on LinkedIn, I have become that person on LinkedIn where I will comment on people's posts and say, "This isn't Facebook. Why are you putting this on LinkedIn?" I've literally become that person because LinkedIn is a professional platform. I don't need to know your political beliefs. So generally on any social platform, you don't want to put anything out there that you don't want the world to see, including the CEO of your company or your boss. And I like to use the acronym that I made up. It's called DRIPS with 2 S's. And these are the things you don't ever want to post on social media. D, anything around drugs or alcohol. R, religion. I, illegal activity. P, politics. S, anything that's sexual in nature. And the other S, anything that's secretive or confidential company information.
Did you trademark that acronym?
I should.
You
I will have
should.
to, as soon as we get off this
Let me
podcast.
go. Let me go and go to that comment and buy the website, drips.com. Uh, it's so simple, but yet, to your point, people don't do it.
Yeah, they don't get it. I don't know why they don't get it.
Here's another modern day workplace question. An estimated 35% of Americans have at least one tattoo. I know it depends on the particular workplace, but what sort of advice do you have about appropriate workplace decorum when it comes to displaying or not displaying tattoos?
Read the room, first of all. Then that means figure out what industry you're in and look around. Okay. So if you are in a more artsy industry and you're looking around and everyone's got tattoos, including your boss, and people don't mind, showing them off, that's fine. You can do that. However, if you're in a more corporate job, again, read the room, look around, see, do a lot of people have tattoos? Are they showing their tattoos? And if they're not, then you need to cover up your tattoos. I worked with a guy who I just saw like at, I think it was in Santa Monica, and he was so tatted up, and I had never seen his tattoos. I was just shocked. And he said, "Oh yeah, at work, I don't show my tattoos." He always wore long sleeve shirts with a t-shirt, and no one knew, because if they did, then they may judge him. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but I'm just saying that's just the reality of it. So yeah, cover up if the people around you aren't showing them, and you shouldn't be either.
Finally, many workplaces have gone casual. The days of the suit and tie or dresses and high heels are gone. But still, how casual is too casual? And how should we dress in a casual workplace?
So never wear anything that you would wear to the beach, to the pool, to work out or do any physical activity, or to a club where you want to attract people. Okay. So stay away from all those things. I think that's if you stay away from those things, that's 80% of the battle. I think the other 20% is you don't want to wear anything that's too revealing, anything that's too tight. Your clothes should be well fitted, nice, neat, and clean. And if you stick by those rules, I think you'll be fine.
As we talk about business decorum and social media, I think many people, and especially the younger people, fail to realize that many employers or potential employers do look at their social media accounts. Do you think it's fair for employers or potential employers to look at someone's social media, or is that an invasion of privacy?
Oh, it's absolutely fair, because when you put anything online, you're giving up all your private rights. That's the way I see it. That's what social media is. You're putting your life online. So you better be ready for people to look at it. And I can tell you, I know a lot of recruiters, and every single one of those recruiters, the first thing they do before agreeing to any interview someone is they look online to see if they can find them on social media.
Let's talk old school media for a minute. I understand you're working on a book. Can you share any details about it with us?
Sure. So I'm actually working on two books. One is basically a young person's guide to conquering the world type of thing. And it's a step-by-step instructional guide as to what do you do when you graduate high school or college. So you graduated, right? How do you know what job is good for you? How do you know how to interview? How do you even get that interview? Once you've got that interview, what do you do in the interview? Okay, now you got the job. How do you negotiate your salary? What should and should you not do at work? How do you ask for a promotion? You've gotten your first paycheck. How do you become financially responsible? What do you do with that money? And then etiquette. How do you act in social settings? So that book is the first book that I'm working on. And the second book I've actually written already. It's my memoir. And it just goes through my life from Iran to today. And those books, we're looking for the right partners, publishing partners, and hopefully they'll be out soon.
What's involved in that publishing process? I mean, especially writing your memoirs. I mean, that's a very personal thing.
Yeah.
You want to get the story out there, but I know there's a process after you spent days, weeks, months, years writing the actual manuscript.
Yes. So I wrote actually during the pandemic. I wrote, 4 or 5 hours a day from month to month to months. And the process is, I wrote it, and then you have an editor. So I handed in 600 pages, and now it's 230 pages. So they just slash, and it's at the end of the day, it's best for the book, right? But yeah, then you have another editor to look at it. So it's a huge process, and you have to find someone that really sees your vision, right? So for even my first book about conquering the world, someone has to see that vision and understand that this is something that every single young person needs in their hands, because you're not learning these lessons. And not a lot of people will see that vision. Not a lot of people will understand that. And you know what? That sucks for them, because it's it's something that everybody needs. So you just have to make sure that the people that you're working with see the same vision as you.
Well, hats off to you for not only going through the process once, but twice.
Yes.
And good luck with that. Please keep us posted
Thank
as you go
you.
through that publishing process.
Will do. Thank you.
We have just a few minutes left. Patty, your life story has been so inspiring. What parting advice do you have for audience to feel more empowered, lead through adversity, and achieve their goals?
That first of all, if I can do it, anybody can do it. I've always said that if I have gone through the life with all the obstacles, so if I can do it, anyone can do it. But I think there's three components to success and reaching your goal. The first one is you gotta work your ass off. You gotta work hard. There is no shortcuts. You just cannot shortcut this. It's a process. So you got to put in the work. And I love the quote from that says, I'm trying to remember. Oh, it says, the harder I work, the luckier I get. I think Samuel Goldwyn said that. And so you got to work hard, number one. Number two, you have to embrace failure. Some people get so discouraged with failure, they let it, just destroy them. And what people don't understand is failure is a necessary ingredient for success. It's absolutely necessary. Anybody that you see that is successful has failed over and over and over again. And the reason they're successful is because they failed. Because when you fail, you learn from those mistakes, you become better. If you don't fail, you're never going to get better. You don't really learn from success. You only learn from failure. And they asked Edison, they were like, oh, well, how do you feel that from the fact that it took you 1,000 failures to get to the light bulb? And he said, I didn't fail 1,000 times. There was 1,000 steps to getting to the light bulb. So failure is just steps. It's getting you one step closer to your goal. And, you can't let that break you. And I think the third component is perseverance. In reaching your goal, it's not going to be easy. You're going to be thrown down to the ground. You're going to be heartbroken. You're going to be stomped on. I mean, it's a tough ride, man. It really, really is. But I like to use the analogy that, boxers aren't judged by how hard they hit, but they're judged by how often they get up. So you got to just get up. You're going to be knocked down, but you got to get up and persevere. And if you do those three things, you can accomplish any goal that you set for yourself. I promise. You just have to get up.
Well, Patty, this has been an unbelievably productive conversation because we found the title not only for one book, Tell Your Own Damn Immigrant Story, but for your business book, you got to work your ass off. So I'm just putting them out there. I love those. And so I'm just going to, I'll just take 10%.
Thank you.
Fine.
I'll give you credit. I'll give you credit for that.
Perfect. And one last question. It's probably the most important one of the day. What do you think of our Cowboys' chances this year?
Oh, they're going for it, man.
We're going for it, right?
Yeah, I watch Hard Knocks. I watch the whole thing. Yeah, we're going for it this year. This is it. This is our year.
We say it every year, but this is our year.
I really feel it this time, Chris. I really do.
I'm with you. Pattie Ehsaei, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. This was a blast. I had a great time. Thanks, Chris.
No, you're an amazing, inspirational woman and truly appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
And as always, thank you to our wonderful audience for tuning in to Next Steps Forward. I'm Chris Meek. For more details about upcoming shows and guests, please follow me on Facebook at facebook.com/Chris Meek Public Figure and on Twitter at ChrisMeek_USA. We'll be back next Tuesday, same time, same place, with our leader from the world of business, politics, public policy, sports, or entertainment. Until then, stay safe and keep taking your next steps forward.